He's back on the scene. Instagram dropped it. Are you a scrub or are you kind of nice? What's the deal? How you been roping? Welcome back to the Kingdom Vision podcast. We got a lot of I'm backs happening right now. We're back together. First time in a while on the Kingdom Vision podcast together. Braden Harris and Cole Harris. Today, we are talking about rodeo. We're going to be talking about Braden's comeback to the sport. He's back on the scene. Instagram dropped it. Let's get into it, Braden. You talk about why you left, why you came back. Kind of give us like a 2-year rundown.
Oh gosh,
I know. You can go. There's a lot there. But
you want to start off with why I left?
Why you left?
Okay, I mean, I think I've touched on this. I mean, a little bit.
I think we mentioned it in a couple other podcasts.
Quite a bit in some of the other podcasts, but I mean, obviously everything that I do, it comes down to God and what I feel like He's leading me into. And at that time, I knew wholeheartedly that God was leading me out of it, and He took the desire from me. Or however way you would phrase that, like it just wasn't there, and I just knew that from confirmation from other strong Christians in my life. That's probably the most important thing, is just having those other strong Christians come to you and be like, I feel like you're right, that God's leading you away from this, and being able to make that decision with other people that are praying for you and want to hear God for your life is really what the biggest thing that comes down to my decision. First, I'm hearing God, and what are you saying? And I'm like, God, something I always say to Him is just like, God, if this is your will, I know how you work, and I know that you will show yourself in other people and have them come to me, because I know that I've made mistakes before on hearing your voice, and I don't want to ever lead myself. I want other people to also come in and confirm what you're saying. So that'd probably be the biggest thing, is just other people coming and being like, hey, I feel like you're being led in the right direction, and this is definitely God that is telling you to step out of rodeo.
Yeah, because you'll hear, I've been around conversations like, God told me to quit. And people kind of throw around that phrase, like, what happened to Braden? God told me to quit. Wyatt goes and he talks and he's like, what happened to Braden? God told him to quit. And then God told him to come back. So this God told me, you think it was a lot of maybe idolatry and your identity being wrapped up. And then first, what do you think?
So I would stop at that, like, because I will always, I think it's one of the hardest things for a man to come to, is that I quit trying to figure out God a long time ago, and His whys.
And you're just like, God told me to stop, and you just don't even try
I truly don't
why.
care, and I feel like that's probably my one of my strengths, I feel like, as a Christian and just in life, is that, and something I've always been raised with, is that you get told something, you don't ask why. And you respect the authority. I mean, I just couldn't imagine being, obviously God sets us to have a relationship with Him, and part of that relationship is the back and forth, right? Same way I would talk with Cole, there's that back and forth with God in a kind of that sense, but it's totally different from the part that if I imagine being in God's throne room and being like, hey, now why did you do this?
Yeah, like, you told me to quit.
Right.
Why, though?
And I shouldn't have it, don't take this the wrong way, for something so small as rodeo, for me to question God, or if something for me to question what I think God is trying to get me to stop doing, it just seems like that wouldn't be the smartest idea. And so I've never questioned Him. I never care. I truly don't care from the bottom of my heart why He asked me to. My heart just gets so giddy and glad for Him, to come to me after and be like, just like, thank you for being obedient. And I always have that conversation with God, just like, he's just excited to get to be with me and have someone that listens to him, and he enjoys that so much. So yeah, long-winded way of saying I really have no idea, but and I try not to really ask.
I was one of those people at first. I was a while back, because it was 2 years. I think at first, was I hesitant too?
You were hesitant. I mean,
but I
could tell you weren't like, I mean, you weren't not supportive, but you weren't supportive either. Like,
yeah.
Like you weren't, I know you were there for me, but it wasn't like, you're like, oh yeah, I agree, God's telling you to do this.
Yeah. Because I remember I was a little hesitant, and you would venture out. Ever since we got saved, you feel like you got saved. This is time. You got saved 2 years ago. Or you feel like you've been saved? It's one of those questions. It's tough.
It's kind of one of those things.
You started following.
I really
the will
I gave
of God
up.
Then
I gave up my life 2 years ago, or
okay,
over 2 years ago. It's getting closer to 3. It's almost 3 years.
That's
now.
crazy, right? We were both pretty much start following God at the same time. I would be like, that seems bold. That seems like, and I wouldn't like question or frown upon it, but I wouldn't disagree with it either.
Right.
But it was cool because when you took those step of faith, especially when you stopped listening to rap, I stopped listening to rap. But then we talking about specifically rodeo, you stopped rodeoing, and at first I was just hesitant, like, why would you do that? Why? What's playing into this decision? And the reason I was so hesitant, because I'm naturally the same way of putting my identity in these things, like basketball or videography. You know, it's so easy to put your identity in things. So I'm like, dude, rodeo's awesome. Why would you quit? Like, because we're so natural, and I'm so natural to put my identity in things. But then months go by, and then I'm like, dude, you were so peaceful. You were walking with the Lord faithfully. You're just pursuing nothing but Jesus for 2 years, and still to this day. So then I was like, over time, it completely, like, God showed me is like how good it was for you to step away, because it was just all Jesus.
Correct. Just you look in the Bible, and every Bible story is centered around a man being obedient to a God that's bigger than him, and it would look foolish to everyone else. And I've always wanted to be someone, I'm never going to make a decision trying to create that reaction out of people. But if my day-to-day life with God leads me into something that does create that reaction, I can't let that change me, right? I can't let that change my decision. And, I've always said, like, you can pick up the Bible and read a couple chapters and you're going to get into a crazy story, right? God is an amazing, crazy God, and he works out things to bring other people to him, to bring other people to life, Maybe the reason that God had me out of it was just so every person that told about me being done roping had to say, hey, the reason that he said that he quit roping is because God told me. And the witness that is getting God mentioned in other people. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But if that's it, that would be beyond sufficient for me, just to have all these people saying, hey, God, he says God told him,
Yeah.
Whether they believe it or not is okay. From a sense of like, but still, that's kind of what you have to say. Like, that's, if you want to say what I was saying, why I quit, that's what I said.
So that's setting that back up into God telling you to quit, and then God telling you to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us, walk through that process.
So it all started with kind of the same thing, just God showing me through the ways he does. Maybe it's I hear his voice audibly. Maybe it's I hear. There was multiple things. I'm getting these visions, these things, seeing me back rodeoing, and I'm like, God, I know that I haven't thought about rodeo one time since being done, and like I said, I never really missed it much because what I was doing was so amazing, and whenever you're in something so amazing, you always have to give up something to be there.
And you were saying, what was so amazing? Risen Nation?
Just my
church?
life with Jesus, whatever it was I was doing, Risen Nation, it just centered around God, that life. I never looked up and was like, man, I wish I would have roped one more calf. You know what I mean? I was always I really never felt like that. But so I start having these these things that I kind of recognize as maybe being God's voice. And I'm by no means for sure on it. I'm like, God, once again, God, it's going to take more for me to get back into it than just me having these things that could be my thoughts. I'm going to need people in my life that come to me and be like, hey, I feel like you should be going back into rodeo, and not just people that want me back into rodeo, people that are Christian influences on my life were there for me whenever I quit, and even were agreeing whenever I quit that this is God's voice, in the same light. Those people then coming back and saying that. So that was probably the biggest thing as well. Just first off, me hearing it. That's kind of how I guess it goes for me. Is I hear
the believer in general too,
right,
how it
right,
should be.
and that's how it should be. I feel like on a big decision like that, I want to hear it for myself first, and I'm gonna go, okay, I feel like this is you, God, but I know how you are and I know how you work, and you wouldn't have me just flying blind going by myself, because we're a body of Christ for a reason, and you've called others to be able to speak into my life, and I want those other people to speak in my life too. And so that's what happened.
And then one day out of the blue, you're like, oh yeah, I'm probably going to enter a rodeo for fun, just kind of get up there and rope. You didn't even say rodeo. You said, I think I'm going to go up there and just rope in the summer. That's what you said.
So I said I was going to. So this was before I'd made a decision to rodeo. I was just like, really didn't tie in. That didn't really tie in. Like, I always felt fine to practice and hang out and rope at the house. I never had an issue with that. But so that doesn't really tie in as much as far as my decision long term to rodeo. Like, but yes, I was. Yeah, and it could seem like that though too. Me,
whatever it was,
right,
like that,
right.
And that makes sense that it didn't. And then one day, so that's where I was like, oh, he's just gonna rope for fun, because it didn't correlate.
Yeah, I was just planning on practicing and hanging out with the crew, and so.
I think it was when I came to film that one time. You said you're like, yeah, I'm gonna rodeo. I'm going to go probably 40 the next year. And I'm like, it just kind of like, it took a while to like believe it, because it's like, oh, I'm roping for fun till like I'm going to rope 40 a year. And it was just like black and white. And then from a flip to switch. And then, I mean, the last 2 weeks you've been going to rodeos. It's been going good, whatever, regardless of success or whatever. But just the flip of this is like, when you knew, you knew. And that's what I was talking about. I was interviewing a guy recently talking about Jesus. And it's like, talking about a train, and he's like, when the train goes, it's going to go, whether you are on the train or off the train. But it's like when God makes something clear in your life, this is for everybody, it's like, regardless of if you want to or not, and it's convenient because you love rodeo, you grew up around it, so you like the sport in general, but God told you to do it, it's just, okay.
Right. Like kind of what you're seeing is, you're seeing a culmination of a month or two though. You know what I mean? Like I start having these things where I feel like I'm hearing God saying this a month or two before, right?
True.
And I'm then internalizing it. Once I say, okay, this is God's voice 100%, then I'm all the way in, and it's over, right? There's no looking back. I step all the way in. There was that process of having those other people coming into my life that were telling me like, hey, you're going back into it.
Yeah.
That, and in conversations that I didn't start, I'm like, that's kind of a big thing for me, is I always want God's voice to be in other people. And if I don't have to mention it, if I don't have to mention the roping idea, and I feel like God's leading me into it, and someone else is coming to me and being like, hey, you need a rodeo, then that is, to me, is a big thing on like, hey, this is God's voice. And
so how do you, going forward in rodeo, how do you feel like because we talked about this, being intentional about using rodeo for the glory of God.
Right.
Like, what in extremely practical ways, what do you feel like you are going to do other than just go to rodeos and rope good? Are you going to testify, evangelize? How are you going to approach just being intentional?
I want people to know where I stand as far as I would give an arm and a leg for them, right? And that's one of the biggest things that I feel like can testify, as if if you are being loving in all of your situations, and of course, I always want, you have to think of our day-to-day, right? Like, the conversations I have with Wyatt and Cheyenne aren't the same conversation I have with the person I'm only going to see once, right?
True.
And that's kind of the same thing that starts happening in rodeo. You start seeing these people all the time. Well, your evangelism looks differently over a long period of time, right? I'm not trying to seal the deal in a day like I am with someone I meet at the convenience store, right? Someone I meet at the convenience store, I'm like, this is the only time I might see them, and they need to fully understand everything. Versus whenever you're around family, a lot of what you can do is living out the gospel and being that person while also openly testifying, one of the biggest things is if Jesus is on your mind, he's going to bleed. He's going to come out of your mouth. And, I always have conversations with people, but it's truly effortless now for me. You know what I mean? I know him too well. Our relationship is too intimate, to be able to just, everything I have, everything I do centers around him. Right. So whenever any conversation I have, he's probably what I'm thinking about. So he ends up coming out of my mouth all the time anyway.
For sure.
And then obviously if things end up doing well, I'll definitely really try to make sure in the time that I get any screen time or anything like that, I'm gonna really make sure that I try to get out there exactly what I want to say, because you can start getting passive. And that's one thing I did learn about evangelism. If you start getting passive, and it's easy to pass up, and it's easy to start passing up everyone, and just kind of being too agreeable instead of really standing up for what you believe in and putting your foot in the ground.
Your occupation is what you're doing to open up conversations for Jesus. You're a nurse, you're a teacher, you're a rodeo, you're a tie-down roper. It's just what you do. It's not your primary purpose. Your primary purpose is to love God, love others. And that's simply what you said. That's what you said. I just want to love God, and I want to be known to be given an arm and a leg for people.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what the Bible preaches, and it's so true for a tie-down roper or anybody of any occupation. But so many times, like even me naturally, I probably framed the question wrong. I'm like, oh, what are you going to do now that you're a tie-down roper? It's right. Like, oh, there's nothing like, there's no formula, there's no like 5
right.
steps that you're going to, it's just living a godly life in relationship, loving others. For sure.
And I think probably the biggest thing that I'm really knowing right now is that for me being at, a Bible college for the past year, it's easier in the sense of that time.
Talking about loving people?
Well, no, not loving people. Well,
yeah.
Well, yes and no. Like, you are around people that are going to push you, right? And you have to have that, with me in rodeo, I'm going to have to make that decision that I'm going to spend time with God, right? If I'm at a Bible school, every day I go, if I show up to school, we're doing an hour of worship and I'm getting taught the gospel every day, literally every day. And so I'm always, whether I want it or not, I'm going to get good food, right? And it can be very easy to slip into, you get complacent, and complacency sets in. And once that sets in, then you can look up and I think that days lead into weeks and weeks lead into months and months into years. And so you just have to be purposeful about your days with, if you're around people that aren't as, going after as you are, to make sure that you're getting that personal time with Jesus, because that's what it all stems from for me. And thankfully, rodeo does offer that, getting to be on the road all the time. You have that. Yeah. You have that opportunity. And so, yeah, just...
You're on the road all day, just throw in that dwell, listen to the Word of God. Obviously, you repeat. You've been in Romans lately, just listening to the same chapter over and over and over. Come on now.
Yeah, and so I definitely think that it presents its own challenges. I mean, but for me, anytime I'm getting my time with Jesus, loving people's easy. And just knowing how present he is and how real he is, the only way you can do that is by recognizing him and ministering to him and saying, Jesus, I love you and I know you. And I think that is really what sets me up to be able to love people the way I want to, and be outside of myself and never be worried about what people are thinking if I'm spreading the gospel, what I'm doing,
So let's get to the meat and potatoes right here. I mean, maybe not the meat and potatoes, the gravy here. Are you a scrub or are you kind of nice? What's the deal? How you been roping?
I've been roping good. I think that there's things that I'm working on, but I told one guy the other day, I'm like, truth be told, I really do rope better now than when I quit. And part of that is I'm not, I'm
2 years older.
I'm a man now, and I was
grown man with a beard.
Yeah,
you rope better with a beard.
Yeah, I'm a man now,
cowboy
and
too.
so just mentally too, obviously you don't walk with God to get a mental advantage for a rodeo, but that's just natural, right?
Sure.
If you live and you rope for others and you live your life for others, I have the greatest motivation to get to the barn and rope every day. I rope so that people will know Jesus, and maybe one person gets saved because they get to hear my testimony after I win, right?
Praise.
I get that opportunity daily. And how easy is it for me to get to the barn and go make sure I practice and have that mindset? You back in the box and you back in the box for other people and for Jesus. The pressure is a completely different thing, and it's not about you anymore, and you're not afraid, right? There's no fear of how you're going to be looked at. There's no fear of man. It's about getting Jesus into other people and them getting to experience him, right?
We don't follow God to get that advantage, but if God says to do something, we're naturally going to be better off doing it his way.
Sure.
We're not designed to be looking at rodeo. If I don't get a 7 flat and go to the NFR and win a gold buckle, my life is not complete. Of course, your rodeo life will be worse off because you'll be miserable, you'll be idolatry, you'll be coveting, you won't have peace. And naturally, it's probably going to hurt you. Going to the roping arena, you go out there and practice. I was here a couple weeks ago for about a week, and you're out there like 4 or 5 hours a day just roping. And I'm like, normally people... I don't know what's normal for rodeo, but that's hard work, being out there in the heat and actually roping and doing physical activity. Like, I'm out here working on a computer 8 hours a day, or somebody's doing a teacher job 8 hours a day, but you're roping for 4 or 5 hours a day doing physical activity. So it's like, it's hard work, and naturally it's just a joy, and you should feel a joy and a peace and have more of a work ethic if you're doing it for Jesus, instead
100%.
of people think, oh, you're doing it for God,
100%.
that it's taking something away from you, but it's
Right.
not.
Yeah, I think
People have
that
that misconception.
I definitely think that there's that perspective like that's misconstrued. It's like, if I truly believe that I'm doing this as unto God, and I can attest to the fact that I was a complete bum, before Jesus. I was lazy. I didn't do jack. I didn't want to do anything.
As was I.
And I was a complete bum. I couldn't work hard because I just have never been able to work hard for me. And my thing was like, if I was living for me, what do I want to do? I want to watch TV. I don't want to do
2K.
jack, right? And now living for others, now I know that laziness isn't an option now. I'm living for others, and I'm living and doing all my work I do is unto Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And so it's completely changed me, and there is that natural advantage. Just knowing Jesus completely changes every part about you. There's peace when you walk into the box. There's the hard work ethic. There's a will that to get the gospel spread that other people might not have. So yeah, there's a gospel advantage. Favor ain't fair.
Favor ain't fair. Thank you,
Shout out Keenan Clark.
Yeah, that was a good little bar he dropped. But I feel like that was a good episode. You got anything else? Final thoughts?
No, I know I kind of I ate up the episode there, but
that's what Braden's back. That's the episode.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I just again thank you to all the people that, especially the people that were. My whole family was always very good to me throughout the whole process. And, my dad, my mom, I stepped back into rodeo, and it was like full support immediately. That's pretty wild. So, I'm sure dad and mom will see this, but them too, thank y'all so much. And I know it wasn't easy for them making all the decisions I made. It definitely had worldly implications that wouldn't have been possible I couldn't have lived and done the things I wanted to do if they wouldn't have supported me. I can't go to a Bible college that doesn't give you any that's non-accredited.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no
that's not accredited, and living there and all these things, if they didn't support me, that like it wasn't much of an option. So thank y'all so much, and I'm just happy to be back and get to tell more people about Jesus. That's what I care about. So
Praise the Lord. Well, all right, guys, that was the end of this episode. We'll see you on the next one. God bless y'all.